and welcome to the 8th meeting of the Civilian Police Review Board. We have a couple of board members that I hope will be joining us. As a matter of fact, I may see one coming in now, but I do like to get started on time, and especially for our viewing audience, as the meeting is scheduled to start at 2. The first agenda item is the approval of minutes from the previous meeting. May I get a motion to that effect? So moved. Is there a second? And a second. Are there any questions? Then all in favor of the passage of the minutes, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Just a couple of, and I'll call them housekeeping matters, but I think I wanted to do them in the public session so that those citizens who watch us will understand. So the first one has to do with the name change of our Inspector General, who started this week. Ms. Hendricks had a hyphenated last name, and she's dropped the last portion. So she will now be, her name is Jacqueline Hendricks. Is that correct, Inspector General? Yes. Okay, thank you. The other item actually occurred in the executive session of the meeting, our last meeting, but again, for transparency with the public, and it involves our board member, Stuart Argon, who shared with us that he had changed his first name, and so I'm going to ask Mr. Aragon to share with us his first name and spell it again for the audience.
Yes, ma'am. First name Gambit, Gambit.
Thank you.
Middle name Stewart. Last name Aragon. It is hyphenated in the O, by the way.
The last name is hyphenated?
In the O. Yeah, there's a little accent right there.
Oh, okay.
The third.
That's quite the name.
I know.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, I just wanted to do that in the public session so everyone would understand. So our Inspector General started on Tuesday of this week. So she actually, working with the city, moved her start date up by a week. Ms. Hendricks and I have had the opportunity to speak on several occasions on a variety of things. I have been a part in working with city personnel, outlining her onboarding, which, has begun, and just everything else, that she needed to do. I would ask, and I don't know if Ms. Hendricks actually remembers what it is, but I would like for Colleen to send to the board the address of the office, and if in fact there would be a city telephone number and city email for the Inspector General, so that we would have that, if you could get that out to us. But I also wanted to let Ms. Hendricks share a few words with us this afternoon, if she wanted to.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to be very short. I just wanted to start off by saying, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and Honorable Board, thank you so much for this opportunity to really serve as your Inspector General. Also for the public that's watching, it is an honor and a privilege to have been selected. I understand the importance of my position, and I will tell you that I will be doing my very best. I have been doing that since day one, since I actually looked at getting I actually looked at doing the position. I've done definitely some research with the charter, and I've been working with the mayor's office to make sure that my onboarding process is going smoothly, and it has been. I want to say that the people here have been so welcoming for me, and so has the staff. So again, thank you so much for this opportunity, and I look forward to having the opportunity to sit and speak with each and every board member to get to know you and to have you get a chance to get to know me also. Thank you.
Thank you. And on that point, each board member will have the opportunity to meet one-on-one with the Inspector General. and you are in that first group of individuals that includes the mayor and certain office holders. I haven't had a chance to ask Ms. Hendricks this. Were you able to get into the training of the AIGs?
Yes, I was, and I was able to do that today. So letting you know, yes, so the
Well, I just
train.
wanted to share that because
Yes.
we're somewhat delaying some of the onboarding. Ms. Hendricks was able to, through the Association of Inspector Generals, she will be attending a week-long training that I approved as the chair. I think it's perfect timing for her. And I think it actually starts March 14th. Right. So again, there'll be a little, if you look at the onboarding, it's like 1 to 15 days and 15 to 30. So all of that is going to be delayed somewhat because of that. But you are right there. We haven't, I would hope that board members might want to actually go to her office for the meeting so you can actually see it. I know she's in an office where they are, in fact, still building out portions of it, so she's sort of there with construction going on. And you are in, although you wouldn't maybe know this, but it's my understanding, the old, we call it the Lazarus Building for those of us who have been around for a long time. So downtown, but not in what I would call the city complex, certainly putting some space. I would also like to ask General Counsel Laura Baker Morrish, I believe she has an introduction, and maybe just sharing with the board how some things are going to work in terms of representation from the city attorney's office.
Happy to do that, Chair Jackson. I don't know if I can be seen on camera standing here. Don't know. Sorry, I don't need to bump you out of the way. Nice to meet you.
Maybe switching of seats there would be good.
There we go. Okay, thank you, Chair Jackson. We decided that you didn't have nearly enough lawyers, so we decided we would add one. What the city attorney's office is intending to make sure that you have representation on a variety of different aspects of the Civilian Police Review Board's work, as well as the Department of the Inspector General. So you've seen Robert Tobias. He's been attending all of these meetings. Robert will continue to attend and to serve the board with any questions that you might have regarding board policies and the operations of the board and things of that nature. Rob is also going to stay on working with the Department of the Inspector General to do what we call our typical in-house counsel type representation, that if there are contracts that need to be reviewed, if there are employment issues that come up from time to time, those are the kinds of services our office and my section typically handle for the departments across the city, and Rob will be available to serve in that role. However, I do have someone else to introduce you to today. Her name is Tiara Ross. I'm going to let her come up and talk for a few minutes. She just found that out. Tiara will be serving the Inspector General's office in a capacity of advising on any legal issues that the Inspector General might have regarding the conducting of the duties of the Inspector General. So if there are questions regarding investigations, if there are questions regarding the collective bargaining agreement, how that might be impacted by an investigation, or laws that may or may not have been violated, those kinds of questions are going to go to Tiara, so she will be able to meet with the Inspector General soon, and so that we have that a little bit of ability for her to be able to engage and provide that kind of level of advice on behalf of the City Attorney's Office. So without further ado, Ms. Ross.
Hello, everyone. In the interest of time, I will not take a whole lot of your time. I know some of you personally, so it's very good to see all of you. I'm looking forward to working with all of you. I will probably circulate my contact information to you in short order. Just a little bit of history about me. I've been with the City Attorney's Office for 4 years now. Prior to that, I supported private equity and hedge funds with JP Morgan Private Bank. Graduated from OSU Moritz College of Law in 2012, so I'm approaching my 10th year being barred here in Ohio, and very much so looking forward to working with you all and with the Inspector General. I don't know where she went.
She's over there.
There you go. And
Thank
you
you.
as well, ma'am.
Thank you, and we welcome you to the team.
Thank you so much.
Okay. I think with that, we'll get back to the agenda, and we will welcome Kenston Henderson from the City of Columbus HR Department. And we're going to finish up our training, education. This is DEI and cultural competency. I conferred with Mr. Tobias. I wanted to get another opinion as to where we were as a board completing our mandatory training as set forth. And so with today's training, there's only one subject that's left. Again, that's the mandatory. We anticipate other suggestions for training coming from the training committee, but that is the subject of de-escalation. And I need to turn, because I'm not recalling something, I don't believe that they are available for the April meeting. So we're going to have to figure, that out. But that would be the last part of the mandatory training. So I just want to say thank you to the board and everyone who's been involved, because I think we've done good work getting to, this far. And again, understanding that we will probably have much more that we will do, but in terms of just the statutory requirement. So with that, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mr. Henderson.
Well, hello, everyone.
Hello.
How y'all doing?
Good.
Y'all good? Is this one of those boards y'all don't talk or we talk? Okay, cool. We're going to have a good time. I'll be with you all for, 2 hours, 2.5 hours? Oh, Lord. Can y'all handle that?
I
Two?
would like at least
You don't want them falling asleep?
15 to 20,
Okay.
let's say until 4:30.
Okay, got you.
So that gives you about 2. And we have a 15-minute break.
Okay, got you. We got to have that break. So, well, I'm excited to be here, and sorry I couldn't be here the last time. I had got that thing called COVID, so that took me out, and I didn't get to sing and dance with Karen for that last process of the implicit bias. So what's one thing that you all, to start it off, what's one thing that you all took away from that bias session or have implemented because of that session as it relates to bias, implicit bias? We all have it. Yeah. Was there anyone saying, I don't have bias? Okay, everybody told the truth. Okay, good. What else? How has it impacted the way you think through things, whether it's personally or professionally?
I think that considering when she did the flashing of photos and asked us not only whether someone was welcoming, but also whether they were competent, and our first impressions of that has been something that stuck with me.
Good. Who else? Y'all feel like experts in that implicit bias? No. I know Kyle is probably, And Doctor. Yeah. Hey. Implicit bias. Okay, cool. Well, we're just going to continue this conversation as it relates to cultural competency. And so within citywide training and development, we before COVID, we had a 2-hour class, a 3-hour class, and I'm sure we can do an 8-hour class to go deeper, right? But we just gave a good 2 hours worth of it. And so cultural competency is kind of similar to different levels.
Let me interrupt you for just a moment.
Yeah.
If the board requests, at some point, we may want you or others to come back.
Yeah.
We're not saying that this is all that we need, and I think we realize that it's a very limited time period. Yeah. This is just what we must do.
Yep.
But it certainly would not surprise me if there was a thought we wanted to further explore.
Okay. Yeah. We are ready and available. So with DEI, discussion of DEI, there's different levels, right? And depending on how deep we've all gone within, let's just say the last 2 years with everything that's taking place around the world, we could have gone real deep and been super experts on it. But today I want you to look at, if you turn into your packet, or there's a loose page in the back that looks like this. And if you can slide for me. And before we get into it, just our objectives today is to identify the elements of cultural competence and culture in the workplace, increase our understanding of our own cultural background and how it affects, your perceptions and interpretations of other cultures, recognize the 3 dimensions of cultural awareness when interacting with other cultures, and then develop the skills needed to practice respectful and caring behaviors. Next slide. Understand how values differ among cultures, identify different communication styles among diverse cultures, give and receive feedback in a caring, respectful way, and then adapt behaviors and support cultural competency and minimize behaviors that undermine it. And so I want you all to, as we go through this, to frame it around the work that you are currently doing here in this space, in this room, but also what does that look like from a personal, even in a community, what does it look like to you, and how we can use this information. And so I put in there this loose document, if you go to the next slide, called the Continuum of Cultural Competency. And so when Karen or myself or my other colleagues teach this session, we understand that, again, there's different levels where organizations are and where people are as individuals. And so some organizations are really still at this cultural disruptiveness, and we'll just walk through it, where it's kind of forced rights and privileges for only dominated groups, which means there is no rights or anything for other people outside of that dominant group, which is not good, okay? Followed by the attitudes, policies, programs, practices within a system or organization that are destructive to a cultural group. This is where, when we talk about DEI, where some organizations, they're still operating 20 years ago of DEI, where they want to get numbers. And it's about getting the numbers into the room, but what happens after that is once they get the numbers, those same people run out as fast as they came in. And so nothing stayed because the culture wasn't ready for other groups. Does that make sense? Then it goes on to the next section of the cultural incapacity. And so we understand there's racism that exists with the stereotypes, unfair hiring practices. It's embedded in the system of the organization, and they're not ready to effectively respond to the needs of diverse groups. Okay, it's still a step above the first one, but we still got more work to do. Then there's some organizations, some groups that are under the cultural blindness, where they say, treat everyone the same, but that's not working. And thus we come into the conversation of DEI as relates to the differences between equity and equality, right? Many organizations, they'll say diversity, equality, and inclusion versus diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so for just a quick example of the difference between equity and equality is, equality is wants everyone to be treated fairly across the board, right? But equity says everyone has access to everything, okay? And so if I have, for example, did anybody watch the Super Bowl? Pre-game Super Bowl, there was a deep discussion that took place as it relates to the hiring of coaches, African-American coaches. And one of the sportscasters, they said that's a good thing. However, how are we going to make sure they're successful? Well, we have to give them access. We have to be, that's where equity comes into play. It's not enough to give someone a job and not give them the resources to be successful, right? So yeah. And then we go into the cultural pre-competence. We'll explore cultural issues. They're committed, and needs of organization and individuals are assessed, where they're really trying to get into what it takes to be culturally competent within the organization. And then the cultural competence, where we are going to be today, is recognizing individual and cultural differences, where it's seeking advice and include diverse groups of people. Just like I said, the different levels of diversity and equity and inclusion, with diversity is, the start of it is you've been invited to the table, but you're not allowed to speak. The second level is I've been invited to the table, I'm allowed to speak, but they don't value what I have to say. And then that third level is now I've been invited, I'm able to speak, and then now the words that I'm giving off, the wisdom I'm sharing is valued and taken into consideration when decisions are being made, okay? And so that's the area we're moving into. And then the cultural proficiency is implement changes to improve services based upon cultural needs, where we're really pushing the needle forward in a great way. And that's where organizations, they'll start to develop organizational philosophies and strategies around, their DEI work that they're doing. How can we make our culture healthy and thriving? And that's what we want to do. So let's talk about what exactly is cultural competency. What comes up for you when you hear those words, cultural competency? And I know we just went over a whole graph, but what would you say it is? Awareness. Come on, throw out some words. What would you say cultural competency is?
I'll piggyback on awareness, but more so awareness that that we're a multicultural country, and that that there, and within that there is a hierarchy of how those folks are treated.
Yeah. What else? Cultural competency.
I'm sorry, respect.
Respect. Yeah.
Treating people the way they would like to be treated.
Treating people the way they would like to be treated.
I think understanding how differences may impact behavior, may impact communication skills,
Wow.
and not expecting everyone to fit into your own cultural norm.
Yeah. The whole assimilation thing. Yeah. So the willingness and ability to interact respectfully and effectively with individuals and groups, acknowledging the common and different elements of our cultural identities. The willingness and the ability to interact respectfully. Y'all put that whole definition together. And effectively with individuals and groups, and acknowledging the common and different elements of our cultural identities. What does that say to you? There's a word that can frame this to say cultural competency. What word jumps out to you? If we put them all together, huh?
Appreciate.
Appreciate. Yeah, what else? What else? I feel like something has to happen before we become willingly to interact respectfully.
You've got to be open-minded.
Good.
You
Gotta be
can't
open.
come into a situation with preconceived notions about an individual without first, as my dad used to say, you can't judge a book by its cover. You got to read in between the covers themselves before you understand what the book's all about.
That's good. That's good.
You also have to value
Yeah.
each person. And a lot of folks, don't do that. Just by meeting you, I value for who and what you are and what goes into making you the person that you are.
Yeah. Appreciate that. If I threw the word out there, care, does that need to be a part of this before you can be willing?
Did you say care?
Care.
I put care and value together,
Yeah. Yeah.
different words, but that was what I was getting at.
Yeah.
You've got to care. Yeah, I agree.
Like, because again, when we went down the spreadsheet, that the continuum is like, do I want to? Because a lot of the leaders we talk with Citywide, because we do work outside the city as well, and is that, some leaders aren't ready for this to take place. And the ones who actually care or value this work, then we're able to start seeing some good movement, okay? How does this relate to what you all do? Cultural competency, or the work that you'll begin to start doing as well?
Based on what we've been talking about in the past few minutes, each of us around this table must care about the people that we've been asked to come and serve, you know, on each side of the equation. There's got to be a care factor there, you know, otherwise, why are you here?
Yeah, I'll follow that up and say, not only us as a board having to care, but then also about all the different stakeholders that are involved. And we're talking about issues of inequality and bias and these systemic issues. This cannot just be something that's prescribed upon us for us to do. We have to be invested in actually addressing it, acknowledging that there's issues, first and foremost, and then taking the steps to address them.
That's good. That's good. That's good. Yeah. I mean, because just think, you know, some of the some of the organizations we had to work with as it relates to implicit bias, people weren't voluntold to be there. And so they were voluntold to be in the sessions. And so what happens is that, you know, they come in with their own biases in the first place, and they come in closed. But by the end of the sessions, and Karen can attest to it, is that they're like, oh, I needed to be here. I done found out some things that I didn't know, some biases that were uncovered. And so it's a good thing to care, to say, you know what, I want to make sure I'm thinking through this in a diverse way. Agree? Not agree? What's your thoughts? Any thoughts? All right, next slide. You can hit it one more time. So when we talk about the results of cultural competency, the results are words and actions that recognize, affirm, and value the worth of individuals and communities and protect and preserve the dignity of each. So when we get good at being culturally competent, these are the things that can happen. Our words and actions that recognize and affirm. And that is not on your page, so I'm sorry. We affirm the value, the worth of individuals and communities. All right? Do we value the people we serve? Do we value the people we're around? Whether it's personally or professionally. And do we go forth and protect and preserve the dignity of each of them? It's crucial. Anything to add before we move? All right, so let's go.
That's a very essential point, especially with this board, because as I've listened and observed in the majority of our meetings, there's still a certain amount of in my opinion, you know, some bias and distrust, even among the board members, because we still, some of us have come here, you know, we're preconceived, I don't want to say notions, but agendas. You know, we've got our own agendas. And I think as a board, you know, we've got to first be able to get over a lot of the cultural problems that we have as a board before we can come together and work as a cohesive unit, you know, to go forth and take care of our charge.
Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing.
I think that point's really important, especially the actions part. I think especially in this space, there's a lot of people who would like to articulate that they value and affirm these things, but when it comes to actions and taking that next step, it's much harder, and it's especially harder when you go further, talking about protecting and preserving the dignity of each. I think when faced with the factors, the structures, and those who would not affirm the dignity of each other, sometimes there is a lack of a willingness to confront those actions, and that's something that's a much harder step. Is really how do you actually become an active bystander in the midst of active undermining of the values and dignity of other people. That's a much harder question to go not just from words but to action.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking forward to us trying to challenge those structures.
Yeah. And that's the levels, right? That's the different levels, right? We become aware, educate, and now it's time to put these things into actions, right? When you all took the implicit association test and you found out some things, we then had a choice to make, right? We had a decision to make of whether we're okay with the results or we're not okay, and we want to actually take some action and do something about it. I joke around when I took that the implicit association test and the race portion, and the results was overwhelming. It almost made me go and cry to myself. I'm joking. But my results was that I had a favorable bias towards people, towards African American people. It's a joke, right? Because I come from a whole family of 9 that are African American. Every school I went to up to 12th grade was African American. And so you see, predominantly African American, so you see why I would test that way. So there was not a surprise. However, it's on me to say, okay, I see these results. What do I want to do about it? If I'm going to do something about it, what am I going to do about it? And then it's like, okay, so who do you network with? Looking at my whole list of friends. Do you want to make some new friends? Okay, you got some options. We can do that. Do you want to expand, what church do you go? And I made some serious changes. But again, it's up to us that we move past education, awareness, now to action, which is a good thing. Anything else to add? Whichever one.
I like the way you just explained it, because it's true. I mean, when we were, if you're white, you hung around with white people, you might, on those tests, you might be biased towards whites. And then I think when you're teaching these courses, it's good to make an individual think about, like you just did, take that next step. Okay, so now what am I going to do about this? Instead of saying, oh, that's how it is and that's how I'm going to be. And, well, the next step is maybe what do I do now? And then maybe tell us or tell the individuals, well, what do we do now specifically? How do we give us a little guidance?
Yeah.
After you take those tests.
Yep.
and this is what happens, then what are some good things to do? Maybe go out and seek individuals of other cultures, join organizations, do things that if you don't have family members who are of another race or of another whatever,
Yeah.
You see what I'm trying to say
Yeah.
here? Okay.
That's exactly it. That's
Okay.
exactly it. I mean, again, it goes back to the previous slide of the care, right? The care and value. If we care and value it, then we're going to take some actions.
Okay.
And if you don't have the answer, then it's called phone a friend.
Yeah, one of the words that I might want to add would be intentionality.
Oh, yeah.
There's lots of forces in opposition. And, as you start moving along in terms of the grid that you're laying out, at every point, it's easy to stop. I don't know that care is sufficient. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. And there is, intentionality where you do set yourself on a certain path. And regardless, I'm going to continue on this path. And so, I think of commitment, those kinds of words, that because an emotional response just will only take you so far, but when you get punched in the face, you'll stop. So you have to, much of this journey is an intentional journey.
Okay. Well, let's make a cake real quick. we got care, we got intentionality. What other words will we put in the recipe for it to make an amazing cake? To make sure that we're continuing on this journey.
I think the other word that Pastor Nathan used, value,
Value.
that should be a part of that recipe as well.
Yeah.
Accountability.
Accountability. That's good.
Self-introspection.
Self-introspection. Yeah. What else will make that a pretty good tasting cake? I don't know why I said cake. I must be wanting some dessert or something, but
Being willing to be vulnerable.
being willing to be vulnerable. That's good.
I feel like to think of the word curiosity, because I think it's one of those things that if you think you already know everything, then you're not going to, want to learn more about other
Yeah.
about other
Yeah.
people who are not the same as you.
Yeah.
Curiosity. And I'll elaborate just a little bit. I still get the paper, and I've noticed over the last year or two, let's just look at restaurants. They're always highlighting restaurants where I would not have experienced that type of cuisine. And so I've started putting together, tearing them out, doing whatever, and saying with intentionality, once a month you're going to go to some place very different. Or it also could be, you could think in terms of festivals that you never go to. I was talking with the Inspector General and on her onboarding, and you know how it is here in the summer in Columbus. They're starting at least Memorial Day throughout. There are all of these festivals. Well, there's one that I have never attended, and I have been very reluctant, but I told her, I said, if you go, I'll go with you. That would be Comfest. Why it is?
Uh-oh.
Have a good time.
What?
You'll have a good time.
A great time.
Well, I have just been very reluctant to have that experience.
I know you're gonna see a lot of tattoos out there. You might not like it.
But see, that's what I'm talking about, right? Because we're talking about learning and trying to be more comfortable with things that you're not comfortable with. So I need to be prepared to see thousands of tattoos.
And other things.
Oh, a lot of other things.
And other things,
Never.
That's
Never.
good.
I've
That's
never
good.
been.
Lovely community day. Come on.
But you see, we just spotted bias. We just spotted bias. What else? Is there anything else you want to add to this cake?
To piggyback on what Brooke was saying and Chair Jackson about curiosity. Yeah, I mean, the edge of humility, that
Yeah.
there is a recognition that we're not experts. And we're certainly not experts in someone else's culture.
Yeah. So you saying we shouldn't speak on behalf of people, and we're not a part of the cause?
Yeah, we allow the person to define themselves.
All right. Next. So what does cultural competence look like? You can just let them flow. All right. Becoming aware of cultural identities and how these influence the way others are treated. Engaging each other as individuals and groups in a continuing, meaningful dialogue with the intent to establish ways to reach shared goals. Exploring ways to tap into the full potential of all members of an organization. Can this be useful here? Can this be useful in the areas that you work in? What kind of impact would it make if we're becoming aware of the cultural identities of the people we're around? Think about it. Anyone have any examples of how you have tapped into different groups of people from different cultures?
My neighbor, who is the Nepali Indian, and his wife is Indian, I mow their grass. And when they first moved into the neighborhood and getting to know them, and now we're great neighbors.
Took the time. Go to the next one. Demonstrating caring and respectful behavior, being conscious of the dynamics inherent when cultures interact, and respecting each person as an individual. So, not to put anyone on the spot, but do we respect each other as an individual in this space? And if not, can we continue to work towards it? Being aware, right? Understanding our biases, understanding, what everyone brings to the table. But again, that takes time, that takes energy, that takes commitment to make it happen. I was working with a manager here within the city who intentionally hired 10 people from 10 different countries. And I said, whoa, that's a lot. And then he came to me for coaching for how to make that work. Because it was a great idea, and it makes sense, but there comes some things that comes some work, some good work that needed to take place. For him to make that work, what do you think needed to happen? A lot of things, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's how different cultures make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Who makes decisions? How much process do you have? Is a decision, or is it just, we're still in process after we arrive at a decision? How do we resolve conflict? Who gets to speak? How explicit is communication? I mean, there's just a ton of things.
Yeah. And he told me all those were problems. So, but, we met for communication, which is key, right? A lot of organizations, they want to undertake, DEI work, but I let them know that it's going to take some work. It's going to take time. It's going to take you being committed to the process, because it can get, people can feel defeated after a while when they have to say, you communicate differently. So each of us in this space and in this room communicate a little bit differently. We're not all the same. We don't communicate the same. Some people are direct versus others, and that can be a problem to others. One of the biases that I found out within the organization was that if you didn't speak in a meeting, that meant you weren't all in, or that meant you didn't care about the organization. And I'm like, well, where did that come from? It's a culture thing. And so, are we okay with doing things a little bit differently? So, let's continue on with that. So, again, why is it so important that we do this work here of cultural competency? Why? What is the importance of it? What will it do by us committing to be culturally competent? What will it do for us?
I'm not 100% sure I'm going to be able to answer what you just asked, but it's just sort of something that just dawned on me just right now, really sort of from that last part of the presentation, which is, this shift from, and I'm an immigrant. I came to the United States in 1985. So for us, when I came, the whole notion of being an individual was sort of something you wanted to stay away from, right? You wanted to, you said it, and I think that's what triggered it. You wanted to assimilate. You needed to become part of the melting pot, if you will. And now we are seeing a shift in that, I believe, in society as a whole, where we're valuing more individuality than we are the whole notion that you have to be just like every other American in this room kind of thing. And to your point, we all think differently, we all communicate differently, et cetera, et cetera. So, sorry, just random thought. I don't know
good.
if anyone else might find some use of that.
That's good.
Point in the change that's happened in, just a generation, because that's absolutely true. I myself think that, in order to get to know everybody and then be able to work together as a team, it's important to understand who you are, what our differences are, and what common ground that we can find.
That's good. That's good.
And to follow his statement here, when I'm also an immigrant, so when I came to the United States, I was born in Italy, so a lot of Italians changed their names so that you didn't know that they were Italians, and now it's very much changed. You want to, some individuals give the middle name. For example, we gave my son my maiden name. So now you want to preserve your culture and that sort of thing. So that's.
I think it's definitely something to consider, as far as when we do have our frustrations with possibly, the world around us not necessarily moving to the speed that we would like it to be moving at. There has been a complete shift in our society, and that takes time for people to sort of adjust to, and depending, and you throw other sort of different intersections into it, right? Age and gender, et cetera, and you definitely have the makings of, a large group of people that would probably need more of this kind of training, specifically, individually or whatnot, so that they could get past those cultural competencies they've been locked into at that point, I guess, right? Or,
That's good. 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 Thanks for sharing. What else? The importance of this.
It's how you create more equitable and inclusive environments. It's how you can help recognize and affirm one's humanity and a sense of belonging. So I think that's why it's important.
That's good. That's good.
And for organization, if you have organizational self-interest, you want to use all the talents that are there and not have buried talent. And if the perspective is like the one that you describe, this sort of dominant culture, people have to initiate to speak. If you're not speaking, you probably don't have anything to say. You're not using this person's talents. How do you bring those out so that the organization will succeed? So
That's good. That's good.
to just sort of be a little vulnerable and sort of piggyback a little bit on the flag that you were raising earlier. It's even within this board, this body, I do feel that there is still that there isn't that tapping into every single one of those resources. And I personally, I feel like mine haven't necessarily been considered to be tapped into like that, especially with I don't know, not especially with anything, just in general. So it would be helpful for, myself included, how do I make myself more available to, I don't know, be more understood by my fellow board members, I guess?
That's good. That's good.
To your point, and I've had, some thought about this. Many times you don't really get to know, to understand someone. I use the term until you break bread with them.
Mm-hmm.
Very difficult, like around this table, once a month. So something for us to think about, and I don't know which committee or whatever. We know we have to be very careful about how many of us can come together at one time. But still, should we decide we should do something, and whether we draw names or whatever, but, 3 or, what is it? You can go up to 5. But you don't really get to know someone, I don't think, until you can sit and talk and have conversation, with them. So we might want to put this, well, I'll just jump in now. I was going to share with you at the end of this meeting that my thoughts for the April board meeting is that we're not going to have a speaker or someone come in. We're going to have our committees kind of report to all of us in terms of where they are and where they want to go, but then just some free-flowing conversation. Where are we hearing from each of you? Where do we want to go? How do we get there? And that actually could be, one of the topics, how can we get to know each other at a different level?
You said breaking bread, so could bring in some food.
Pastor Rich said, bring in some food, and
Are the snacks missing? Snacks are missing? Oh.
all right, we can keep going. All right, so when we talk about culture, just real quick, culture is shared values, tradition, norms, customs, art, history. A little bit of everything plays into culture. Manners, customs, beliefs, ideas, ceremonies, language, laws that are written, unwritten. A lot of different things play into culture, and depending on, what culture we're referring to, whether it's the workplace, whether it's even your home culture, or even the culture here that you're now establishing what the culture is, right? And so this is a beautiful place to be because you all are creating culture right within this group and in your committees. Ideas and thought patterns, social institutions, religious beliefs, so many things play into culture if you didn't know. And this is what, people bring to work every single day. It's all these different things. But again, when we looked at the chart, the Continuum chart, it's like what's been there for so long, and now we're trying to change those different things, the culture, the systems, the processes. Those are the things that fight against new culture, new things, new thought processes. Cool.
As you've been going through this, I have literally been asking myself, Janet, are you competent to serve on this board? And I'll tell you the why. In terms of my level of cultural competency as it relates to Columbus. So, I've lived here essentially since 1978. I've always been an East Sider, pretty much East Side, come downtown. Most of my world has been black and white with occasional exposure to, Latinx, another whole group, the LGBTQ community. But I know that there are so many other nationalities that are represented in the city of Columbus. Little, if any, exposure. So I'm just wondering if something that we may need to do, and I could be the only person feeling this way, but do we need to do something to really get a better understanding of who's living in this city now, and those individuals from those communities who might be coming, to us? So as they come to us, should we be in a better place to understand them from this cultural competence? And then if we think that, then how do we get there? And again, that might be another topic for next month. I can see from Dr. Jones's eyes that she has thoughts.
I do. I was looking at Attorney Ross, who is wonderfully working with us now. She has been my co-creator in developing a community immersion program, and specifically, she has identified different communities, organizations, groups, demographics within the city of Columbus that we have placed officers there to meet with them. And so I'm thinking maybe we can come up with an abbreviated version of that and present it to the board perhaps, or Chair Jackson at some point in time, and we can figure out how we can make that work. Because she has managed to tap into some of those communities that we may not be as familiar with.
So for right now, could I sort of task that to the training committee? It would be, or is it,
Training committee, are y'all cool with that?
or just, and again, I just, what I'm trying to do is to make sure that we don't lose it. And so even in terms of your coming back, if we're going to have discussions next month, and we're going to be talking about where do we go from here, I think that's a wonderful, wonderful idea. Maybe even build it out. Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, I just wanted to remind the board that from our first meeting, I brought this up about why we need to be more competent about the groups in Columbus so we could effectively do our job, specifically when it comes to training. In specific, I think I mentioned it first when we were talking about doing ride-alongs and the training that goes on at the police academy, but I definitely am in agreement with that. And so I do look forward to seeing what the training committee is able to bring forth. But this should have been something too that we're all keeping in our mind as we're doing this work about who is being served, who is not being served, and as we continue this conversation, that should really be at the forefront of our forward thinking about the work that the board is going to do in the future. So,
Thank you for the reminder. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Chair Jackson, for the Community Engagement Committee, we have extensively discussed the aspect of the different groups in Columbus, and how do we, down the road, when the IG is in place, and how we reach those groups. So this is very important.
And so you will be sharing more of that with us in terms of your committee.
Yes.
Next, your report.
Yeah.
Okay. And something else that might be beneficial even to the board, and I'm not sure who I discussed this with. It could have been Mr. Blount. And this was for, or maybe Jason. But this was, again, for the IG, although we were talking about literally having a map, a very large map of the city of Columbus. Now, when we talked about it, it was around where are the commissions located. But I am sure that the city also has maps that will show where individuals of certain, that moved here from certain countries may be in greater numbers than in other places. And so if we could also even have some of that so that we could just kind of see and again understand. So whenever we get to the map piece, we'll try to also provide that for the members of the board.
Has that also.
Okay.
See, yeah.
We're just going to have Attorney Ross take on another whole part of her job description with us. But we would appreciate that, so thank you.
It's good, it's good. Cool. So elements of cultural competence, and this should be in your guides, so you can see it well. But knowledge of self and our own cultural influences. Having the awareness of other cultural influences. Effective communication skills that convey respect and sensitivity. And then commitment to respecting individual rights, dignity, and differences through respectful behaviors. So those are all good things. And so awareness of self, where we're starting to recognize assumptions and selective perceptions that we make about ourselves and others. Recognizing how we categorize or put people in slots to make them similar or different than ourselves or from ourselves. using context to help us interpret events and situations, and looking at ourselves from an objective observer perspective, and then seeking out fresh information to confirm or refute our perceptions. And so, as you can see these bullets, they probably remind you of, again, when we talked about bias. You know, the way we used to think about things, the decisions we used to make concerning our thoughts or decisions we made about people or again, processes, this comes to mind. So, are you aware of self? And so, what I want you to do, if you go hit that next slide, you know what? I guess not next. Go ahead, keep going. To culturally competent people engage in self-assessment. They are able to express their individual heritage, values, beliefs, and biases, form relationships based on trust and caring, even in the face of individual differences, and then they acquire knowledge about and are willing to listen to other perspectives. And so, again, when we're on this journey of being culturally competent, how well do you see yourself in those 4 ticks? Do you engage in self-assessment? Do you express individual heritage, values, beliefs? Do you form relationships based on trust and caring, even in the face of individual differences? Is that a part of you right now? Do you acquire knowledge about and are willing to listen to other perspectives? Because those are great things to have and be a part of. Okay? All right, continue. They develop effective responses to challenges posed by new or uncomfortable situations. They show openness and willingness to challenge prejudice and misperceptions, and they recognize similar and different communication, motivational, and decision-making strategies. Makes sense. All right, so you can just go with that first one right there. All right, so let's do some group work, and if I can split, this group here, I won't have y'all move too much, but Willard to there, and then Kyle over to Mary, and then this group right here. And I want you to identify a dimension that your group has in common. You can push that next piece. All right. So to identify a dimension that your group has in common. It could be anything from being working mothers, or vegetarians, or political affiliations, sports, hobbies. Find something that you all have in common. Not kinda, but all have in common, okay? I'll give you like 2 minutes. Maybe 3.
I love food. Talk together. I love food. I love different foods. I like to. Where's the I'm right there with you.
Now I'm on acting.
I haven't had a good relationship with food in a while.
So you're okay.
I was just saying.
And then what else?
Everybody got it? It could be a sports team, it could be a hobby.
My daughter was.
You could graduate from the same school.
Having that one daughter, like having 4 kids. No, that.
See, I'm glad you're creative because I have no idea here. I was thinking what we have in common is that we want to serve our community. See, I'm boring, very boring.
Life lesson. She learned a lot.
The least we should have in common.
I'm a good cook,
Now, I would say.
not a baker, but a cook.
Not a bad.
Similar to
I
that.
hate baking. I hate to
No
put
different than
around the vegetables,
I would be
you know, because there's sugar and
had
butter.
these challenges.
So I feel like I don't want to do that.
We're not to dwell on conversation of last week, and don't ask me why. I speak with my nutritionist, and he wanted to know what's going on. Well, this is my 70th year.
I have limitations
I think I'm pretty healthy,
as to how I
but I want to be healthy without being crazy.
That's interesting.
But
Because
All right.
you mentioned sugar.
It's okay.
old school.
How about you, Carl? You a good cook?
Within our household,
You probably don't have the things.
where mom took care of discipline when it came to.
Yeah, well, when I have the time. So that's how it is. Otherwise, I can microwave with a cheese sandwich.
I really had
Not a microwave either.
Do you?
young ladies, know y'all got the gift of the tongue.
I'll also add in there, what is one thing that you like being a part of the group?
And I would agree, my
I
daughter.
don't think they heard me. So also, can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear me? They can't hear me. So what is one thing that you also like about being in the group that you're in? So think of one thing that you all like about being, huh? Okay. That was a new one. That was a new one. So you got what you have in common, and then what is one thing that you like about being a part of your group?
Or he says one thing I like about being in this.
No, it's about specific, that type of thing. Right, because it's not like, because the next question is, what's one thing I dislike about what people say about this? They're talking about.
Yeah.
So no, we're talking specifically about what do we like about.
Your group.
Honestly, if I just made different choices and gone into law, then we would have all had that again. Literally.
There you go. Close.
Can't go back, Fran. Can't go back.
I'm good on that.
They're probably just showing that on the screen.
Yeah, not in it right now.
Yeah, I don't think.
I'm not very liberal. I wouldn't say not very.
So many times,
I'm
society
looking,
wants to
I'm
put
looking.
the emphasis
But you said very.
on the
And
Because also, I want you guys to remember, the microphone is
I'm talking about even deeper than just being. This particular, my daughter, I had to really be careful. Because my daughter looked at me through a whole different
I'm gonna clarify,
set of eyes.
because I think Kyle and I
Than
are
say
in
her son, my grandson.
So we,
If
we
I
have a
made a
common
wrong
thing.
turn to the right,
So we now are supposed to
because she loved,
identify what
still
we like
loved
about
me.
the other.
But I found out something when she was getting ready to get married.
No, you're talking about
When she first started dating, she would always tell me, young men, if you don't add up to my dad, then I don't want to have to. So it got scary. What did she really see? So I just asked you that question, because I know my daughter, she still watches, she watches me.
I will tell you this, I'm the same parent with the daughter.
Second.
So the thing we like about being in our group, our commonality, and then what's the?
And then one thing that you like about being in this group is this group. Yes. Okay, and one thing that you like about being in this group. Yeah. And then one thing that one thing you dislike about what people say regarding your group.
The group of people that we, so our commonality,
Yes.
so people, okay. I think the thing I dislike, so when I told, so I have a friend who also has 3 kids, also has 2 boys, 1 girl. And when my husband and I found out we were expecting, he said, "Oh, I hope it's not a girl." So why? And he said, because my boys started off hard and then got easier as they got into their teen ages. He said, but my girl, he said, started off super easy. I thought, oh, this is great. He goes, and then when she hit the teens, I didn't know who she was.
Tell me.
See, and I was such a different kid. Like, I have a little sister who my mom says if she was born first, she wouldn't have had twins. But I was a firstborn, totally different than my sister is, and so.
And I can appreciate that. I'm the firstborn of my siblings. And me and my brother
Oh, that's another
All right, 30 seconds.
We could have used that.
are very similar. My sister was a squirrel brown.
Was she the youngest?
Yes.
Oh, was she also the youngest of you all, or no?
She was next to the other.
Okay.
She was just special.
Oh.
Common dimension. That would be that we all have.
All right. Y'all ready? All right, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Can someone speak to for your group? What is your common dimension? Which group would like to start?
So our commonality over here is apparently we all like to eat graters and chicken wings.
Okay, okay.
So we were able
There it
to
is.
come to an agreement on that.
Somebody said that's my group.
There we go. There we go.
Um,
Are we doing all three of them?
yeah, let's go ahead and do all three.
What was this?
One thing you like about being a part of the group that you're in.
Oh, everybody in this group is determined to help improve police-community relations. So we were able to recognize that.
That's good. And then one thing you dislike about what people say regarding your group.
Some people be hating on graders and they try to go to Jenny's, and it's just not the same.
Oh, the bias. It's good. It's good. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing. Who's next? Who's next? Okay.
So our group, our commonality is we all have one daughter. I'm the only one who has more than that, but we each all have one daughter, so we all have that perspective. And we found it was really easy to share about our experiences in that. Now, not saying we have the same, because we have different thoughts about raising daughters. One thing that, and I would say I dislike, because we all had different perspectives. Like one of us I'm not going to say who's who, but one of us has a daughter who's 51, one has a daughter that's 37, one has a daughter that's 4. So we're all in various stages of our parenting journey. I said I wasn't going to
It's like a total mystery.
I know, that's what I said. I was like, that's shocking to me. But if they want to out themselves, I will let them do so.
One has the youngest daughter.
No?
Yes, you can. But you can't guess who's got the oldest daughter.
Okay, let's.
True story.
Okay.
I have the oldest daughter.
Last.
And the last thing is, the thing I dislike about people that say about raising daughters is I think sometimes there's a thought that daughters are hard to raise. I'm the only one that doesn't think that.
Wait until 16.
Good. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing. Your group?
The very first one, because it was the easiest one. We identified that we all have iPhones, and then I'll turn it over to Mary.
Everyone has an
What
iPhone.
was the
That's what
second one, the question on the second one? I can't remember.
What do we all enjoy about being
Oh,
in a
yeah.
group together?
The second question, what Chair Jackson liked about this group is that we are all, we are all very diverse as far as age, sex, nationality, we're a very diverse group. And also, what some of us liked about it was that we are all very intelligent, respectful of others, justice-seeking, and non-January Sixers.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Great.
It's like a title now.
Yeah, it's kind of like yeah.
And so what is one thing that you dislike about what people say regarding the iPhone?
You know, we didn't get there. We were so into
That
the,
Android's better is always the right answer.
oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
That Android's better.
Let's say Team
Obviously
Android or
false.
something.
So let's move on.
All right, let's move on. Let's move on. All right, so this one, this activity is more for individual, examining your own culture. If you want to go ahead and complete those questions, what significance does being, fill in the blank, fill in your heritage have for you? Then what aspects of your cultural backgrounds do you like? And let's go with one each. And then what aspects of your cultural backgrounds do you dislike? Give you about 30 more seconds, and then we'll move.
And we're going to break at 3:30, just so.
Yes.
everyone-
All right, well, would anyone like to share? There's no pressure, but, yeah.
What significance does being Appalachian have for me? I love my culture. I am a transplanted hillbilly. I'm very proud of that. I love the independence of our culture, and I also love that we can about survive any situation. What aspects of my cultural background do I like? We're hardworking, we're independent, but yet we're very neighborly. And what aspects of my cultural backgrounds do I dislike? The portrayal of us as dumb hillbillies.
Okay, thanks for sharing, thanks for sharing.
I said, what significance does being black have for me? I said everything. What aspects of my cultural backgrounds do I like? I appreciate the tenacity of Black people and how we are effortlessly cool. And what aspects of my cultural backgrounds do I dislike? I dislike the lies that other people say about Blackness and our history and our culture.
That's good. Thanks for sharing.
I wrote what significance does being a Black woman have for me. It means that oftentimes in the work that I do, I'm the only person that looks like me at the table. Which aspects do I like? Fortitude. Come from a long line of men and women who had to work really hard and made their families and their family successes first. And the aspects that I dislike, I wrote that due to systemic oppression, there's a lot of limit of what I can even know about my culture. There's only so far I can trace my family back before there's no record. And so I'm bothered by that.
Thanks for sharing, Brooke.
What significance does being a pastor have for me? I wrote down here, I have had the opportunity to see through the eyes of many different races, nationalities, and cultural perspectives in my lifetime. Secondly, what aspects of my cultural backgrounds do I like? I like the great history of our struggle, as well as our contribution to this, to our great nation. And then number three, what aspects of my cultural background do I dislike? And I wrote down here the sad natural habit we have of using the crab syndrome against one another.
Thanks for sharing.
What significance does being an Italian-American woman have for me? I came here at age 7. I couldn't speak one word of English, and I ended up being a criminal defense attorney and having the opportunity to speak for other individuals. And that has been very significant for me. What aspects of my cultural backgrounds do I like? I like what my culture, what Italians have contributed to this culture. We're very loyal people. We're very hardworking people. There's, for example, there has been a prejudice that Italians are lazy, et cetera. But if you really know them and know they work in cement, et cetera, I mean, they've done so much work. And also that they're not so smart. But look at look at the Supreme Court, look at James Cancer Center and all the Italians who are contributing with cancer research. I mean, I'm just talking about Italians now. I know there are a lot of people, a lot of nationalities, but this is the part of that. And then what aspects of my culture do I dislike? I dislike all mafia movies and how we have been, and I dislike the fact that Italians take part in those movies and how they portray that we are criminals. Because, of course, I grew up with a lot of Italians, and I don't know that I ever met a criminal. And I know my fair share of Italians, so I really dislike that. And of course, you know, the laziness and all that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Mary.
I got a question for you before we move on now.
Sure.
As an Italian woman, did you bring some of those great cooking skills with you?
I can cook, like I was telling Chair Jackson, but I don't like to bake, but I can cook, yeah.
Can you make pizza?
I sure can. My dad taught me how to make pizza.
Well, we know what we're having for the next one, no. And I said we're, because I'll be a part. Just let me know. Just let me know where it's at. Anyone else? Anyone else?
There. When it comes to, the heritage part, for me, it's my roots. It's the fact that I am from rural, southern, segregated Southern Virginia. that had a lot to do in forming, who I am. And farming. We were farmers. What aspects of my background do I like? Strong family, strong community, something that I don't see as much now. I call it the front porch, not the fenced-in backyards, but the front porch. Everyone sort of knew, each other. It gave me the work ethic that I've had my entire, life. Is there something that I dislike? I can't say that it is the, how do I articulate this? Almost too much drive. Almost that, and I have been the first in this community in a number of areas, but having this drive that says, Janet, you can't be the last. And so never finding it difficult to just, I don't want to say relax or to enjoy. There's this constant thing that you still have to work for change, that there is still much work to be done in the vineyard, and you can't give up. And I think that comes somewhat from my background.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Yeah.
What do I like about being Nicaraguense?
Oh,
I think it has a very, I tell a very original story as a result of it, right? And if I hadn't been from the country that I was, I wouldn't literally be standing right here, as a result of all that. So I wouldn't, have the life that I have and be blessed the way that I am. So I also do, believe that it is being of a, I don't know, not show of hands, but I bet not a lot of folks maybe had heard of it or whatnot before I said it out loud. And that is my impression of most folks that I end up meeting. But it allows me to be able to share and let someone into a completely different sort of new culture for them, right? Because I grew up in California in the late 80s. I was Mexican for the first 10 years of my life there in California, because you saw a brown person and you automatically assumed that that was what they were. So to be honest with you, it was to be honest with that one here, it's hard to sort of combat those messages that you're getting, especially so young as a child, that this is just don't say anything, just keep your mouth shut, because if you say something, they're just going to get more agitated because they got that wrong, kind of thing, right? So it did allow me to share that part of me, something that's very individual for me. Aspects of my culture that I really do enjoy is the closeness, the familial, celebrations and parties, and my family was all in California, but I'm not. My heart is with my family. I'm always going to be with them. It doesn't matter the distance. It is sort of, and I think that other minority sort of groups also sort of share that same experience in their families. And as far as about my culture that I don't like that for many years now, the rhetoric about Latino folks and immigrants especially is that, that we're all criminals and rapists. So that hasn't been my favorite part to live through in the last 5 years. So that's it.
Thanks for sharing, Gambit. We can take a break now, and then Pastor, we'll get back to you. Thanks. We come back.
And as we take the break is usually about 15 minutes, and hard stop for you, I'll say, would be 4:40. So just in terms of, I don't know what else you have to present, but so you'll.
Yep.
Okay?
Appreciate it.
We will take a break. Yes.
Yeah, so I did my Ancestry.com and found I'm a 100% Ashkenazi Jew. And so my wife says, "You're really boring. There's like nothing else." And I told her that I'm just pure. What do I like about being Jewish? We wrote the Bible. A third of the world worships a Jewish man. We have incredible history going back 2,000 years. I love the food. I love the holidays. I love the push to achieve. What don't I like? That we are killing people with space lasers. So, yeah, and all the conspiracy stuff of that. So, yep.
Thanks for sharing. All right, let's move on. All right, so this is an individual activity with questions of, have you been labeled before? And if you were, how did it make you feel? Now, let's go down to the rest of the questions. And then what difference did you notice in how you were treated or how others were treated? Whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in a community, did yours or others' behaviors change based on the label, positively or negatively? Y'all want to do this activity, or we can move forward?
You know the material.
Uh-huh.
And
I got you.
So I want you to get to what you think would be the most important things for us to take away from this, because there seem to be, quite a bit, but I can't,
Okay.
you've got to make that decision.
Will do. All right, let's move forward. All right, so let's talk about the dimensions of cultural awareness. And what we can get from this is, to become aware of another culture, you must not only notice the superficial differences, what you see, hear, touch, smell, taste, but also the deeper differences in the norms and values that are reflected in how people behave in particular situations. And so we're going to go through the next slide, 5. Well, there's the 5 senses activity. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you taste? What do you touch? So, that's another one. Let's see. We'll do this one activity, and then we'll move. So I want to ask you to record your memories and impressions in the space provided. And then think about the last place you traveled to. Or the last thing you've done if you haven't traveled. Last thing you've done. And I just want you to write down not where you actually went, but what did you see when you were there? What did you hear while you were there? What did you smell while you were there? What did you taste? And what did you touch? But do not write down where you actually went. Give you about 30 seconds. And we'll just do 2 volunteers. All right, anyone want to go? Without saying the name of where you went, just describe it. Okay.
The ocean. So what did you see in the ocean? What did you hear? Blue owl music. What did you smell? Ocean waves, because I believe you can smell those. What did you taste? Mai Tais. And what did you touch? The sand.
Where did she go?
Hawaii.
There you go.
Okay, there it is.
I see video games and flashing lights. I see I hear kids laughing and making lots of noise. I smell food, and I am tasting currently a very delicious cocktail. It was supposed to be a double, but they lied. And then I am touching tickets. Where did I go on Sunday? Come on. This is going to tell me just how fun this group is, though. Yeah, the doctor got it. Yeah. Okay.
So Dave and Buster's, okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
All right, let's move forward. So how values differ among cultures? And the first way is how values differ among cultures is rules versus relationships. In here we find, and this is within the 5 dimensions, is that people in a rules-oriented culture believe that rules, codes, and standards take precedence over individual needs and special claims of friends and relatives. Versus relationships, people in a relationship-oriented culture believe that concern for a particular individual is more significant than conforming unconditionally to a certain rule. Which would you fall under if you had to pick between these two? Rules versus relationships. Okay. What about the next one? Individual versus group. People in an individual-oriented culture are expected to decide matters largely on their own and to take care primarily of themselves and their immediate family. However, people in a group-oriented culture are expected to serve the interests of the group, and the quality of life is seen as directly dependent on the degree to which he or she takes care of others in the group, even or especially those outside of their immediate family. Which one do you fall under?
I'm a group guy still.
Okay. Individual, okay. What about reserved versus emotional? People in a reserved culture are taught that it is incorrect or inappropriate to overtly show their feelings, and it is better to hide feelings or keep them inside. Versus emotional, people in an emotional culture are used to an open display of emotions. Emotional. I think that goes back to even, when the conversation of bias as far as what have we been taught growing up. In the workforce, it was taught, don't wear your emotions on your sleeve, right? Or don't let people see you sweat, so.
I think that's what was shift in culture as well. Individually employers,
Yeah.
are very much more invested in the individuality of their employees and wanting to make them feel appreciated and included and seen versus, the previous culture, that didn't necessarily, or it was just about the work that you put in. And that's the only value that you may have had to that, group of people kind of thing.
Good. All right. Achieved status versus inherent status. So people in an achievement-oriented culture have to prove their worth over and over again based on their accomplishments, or people in an inherent status culture derive their status from birth, age, gender, or wealth.
Are you asking us which one we see ourselves in?
Yeah.
Or which one we are actually living in?
What do you see yourself?
I see myself in an achieved, but I know I'm living in an inherent status.
Is one good or bad, or is one?
I wouldn't say.
Yeah, because I would say
I mean, I think both of these are obviously equally problematic because kind of this achievement-oriented meritocracy, you know, your worth, you're trying to prove your worth based on your contributions rather than your inherent humanity and dignity that comes with it. And obviously, the inherent status culture knows that this is how wealth and power accumulates over time and isn't, you know, available to everybody else. And so I think United States of America, I think it's a little bit of a both and, but I think they're both problematic.
But there's another aspect that when I see this, I look at, you know, yes, me as an individual, I'm an achiever, okay, and within my culture, but the powers that be attempt to hold me back from my inherent status. See, they want to hold me back, so it seems like we have forces that are fighting against one another here to a certain extent. And I know it's not just me, it could be any of us around this table, but still, we've all, and that goes back again to what Karen taught us about biases. You know, because I always think about this, and I can't speak for any other African-American male, but I can be walking down the street and I can see a Caucasian lady come in my direction. And I've just done this on purpose. I'll walk close and I'll watch that individual go around me as if there is some form of bias because I am an African-American male, that all of us males, you know, are violent, you know, are aggressive to a certain point. So I think that there's this ebb and flow type thing here, you know, with opposing forces that are at work for and against.
And I think another part of this, but it's not stated this way, and again, I don't speak for every African American, but I would say that even to this day, there is this thought, you have to work harder, be better. I mean, that literally drove me in the 3 major parts of my career. And when I talk to younger professionals now, it's somewhat of the same thing. I can't be as good as, I have to be better to be accepted.
And how much of that really, you know, inherently is a result of race and gender and, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Time-driven versus flexible time. People in a time-driven culture view time as chronological sequence of events. Planning and staying on schedule is imperative. Keeping time commitments is a reflection on their character. People in a flexible time culture view time as intangible. Time commitments are desirable rather than absolute. People in this culture value the satisfactory completion of interactions with others over promptness and keeping a schedule. Now, this is the this is the war that's happening in a lot of organizations. Is this time flexible, time driven?
It's a change in you know, generations. And you see that a lot, you know, as the older generation is more focused on, hey, time, blah, 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 and the younger generations is more like, we'll get around to it when we get around to it.
If you've been in a flexible time culture, like if you've, you know, traveled to Africa or you travel to Brazil, you know, it's not anything like American culture. It's like not any, you know, when does the meeting start? When people show up. And yeah, I mean, I've been in other cultures where you realize, oh my, I am like the most time-driven person on earth. And I don't think of myself that way, but when you're in a different culture, you realize, this is radically different than the United States.
Yeah, I was gonna say something similar to that, but this is a highlight here of how so many of these different groups are really black and white, because I see myself as time-driven when I'm dealing with other people, and when other people are dealing with me. I take, us as a group dealing with time, drastically different than how I view when I'm on my own time. So it's definitely a bit of both. Like, for instance, keeping time commitments is a reflection on their character. I do agree with that. I say, if you have said, I'm expecting you to be here by this time, blah, 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 you will be here by this time, blah, blah, blah. So I do see that as a reflection of your character. But then again, with my own time, I can do whatever I want because it's my time. You know what I'm saying? So it definitely, in a lot of these, two things that you've presented over the course of these current section of the slides, it's really black and white, but I feel like this is, or not black and white, but gray. I think this one has the most gray area, though, for me at least.
But even like how we interpret what is late. If you're sitting at a restaurant waiting for a friend, what is considered late? Is 5 minutes, like when do you start like they're not showing up? And, compared to an hour is not considered late. So we're very constrained by an industrial model of time and getting people to work at a certain time and all of that.
Yeah, and I think that's really important too, as we think about shifting, with remote versus in person and the types of things in terms of you're sitting there at a desk for 8 hours a day versus how much are you actually completing in terms of your work and your tasks. But you're exactly right. I think the United States of America is a very time-driven culture, and yet we don't provide enough policies and practices to enable people. For example, when you're talking about time and being on time, well, if you have childcare responsibilities, if you have transit issues, there's a number of things that actually cause burdens for you to even be able to make certain things on times, and it shouldn't necessarily be a reflection on your character. So I find it interesting. I think highly recommend Annie Lowry, this piece on the time tax, about how a lot of the policies and practices, especially when it comes to welfare programs and policies, are just a lot of burdensome requirements that you have to fill out and navigate for, and that is a burden that it places on the individual, and if you don't complete it, then somehow that's your fault. So I think there's an interesting balance here as we have to shift. There's no one right answer, but I do think it's something we have to think about.
Sure. All right, so let's go forward. 3 principles in communication. Build rapport, communicate with your entire body, and give and receive feedback to ensure understanding. As far as building rapport, it's using eye contact, and in this area of DEI, it really depends on who you're talking to, right? Because some cultures don't believe in looking you in the eye as a sign of respect, of reverence, right? And so being aware of that, right, being culturally aware of that, you'll know and understand when someone's not looking at you and you're talking to them, that they're not being disrespectful, or you don't take it as them being disrespectful. It's just a part of the culture. Send I'm listening cues, concentrate on the message, keep an open mind, reject stray thoughts. Listen carefully and don't anticipate, suspend judgment. And I gave you all those. Yep, thanks. All right, communicating with your entire body. And so a lot of our communication is through nonverbal. It's not what you're saying. It's what your facial expressions are saying. It's what your tone is saying. It's what your body language is doing. And so I think in your packets it left it blank, but 7% of communication is through verbal, 38% is through vocal, and then 55% is visual. And if we do those things well, then we'll be believable. How many have ever was asked, how's your day going? And then the person left as soon as they asked you. pretty much shows you that they really weren't invested in really how you were doing. Being genuine in your communication will work well. Next slide. As far as your body language, that speaks, your posture, head movement, again, facial expressions. I'm super big on facial expressions. I think it's the musician in me that bias stemmed from playing in a church setting that I've made facial expressions towards the singers when they sing something off key or something. But that wouldn't be Dr. Jones over there. She sings well. Do y'all know she can sing? Oh, she hasn't sung for you? Okay, cool. Sorry. But hand and arm gestures, body movement, again, eye contact, touching, personal space, those all play into communicating. When giving feedback to ensure understanding, use I statements. I feel when you're doing whatever type of behavior that is, approach the person directly, look at the person while talking, be respectful, be specific, and note examples. Tell the person that you would prefer to see, focus on the issue, not the person, and just check for if they're receptive to it, and remain open in these discussions as it relates to getting to know one another, getting to know each other's backgrounds, and so forth. So when giving feedback about a sensitive issue, be specific about what exactly was offensive, and use those good I statements. Okay? Go to the next. So formula for receiving feedback is continue to be open. Seek out examples to clarify. So, for example, you all are having an amazing discussion here in this room, and something was taken out of context. Be curious. Someone said curious earlier. Be curious and ask questions to get a further understanding of what was being said. Share feelings and remain open to discussion, and then thank your coworkers and colleagues for providing a feedback. And actually, the key thing here is commit to the change, giving and receiving feedback. All right, we won't do that exercise. And so this was a communication piece by Edward Hall. He had a career in foreign service and published 2 books based on his experience and how, according to Hall, the culture varies in a way in which information is transmitted. So high context communication says it contains lots of pre-programmed information that resides in the setting and with the receiver of the message, with little information in the message itself. However, communication tends to be indirect, nonverbal cues and signals are essential to comprehending the message. So that's high context. Low context contains very little information in the setting, with most of the information contained in the message itself, and communication tends to be specific and literal. And so confusion arises when a person from a high context culture communicates with a person from a low context culture. You agree?
Yeah,
You got-
America is the lowest context culture on earth. No, it actually is.
Yeah.
It's measurably the lowest, because we're a nation of immigrants, so the only way that we were able to communicate with each other is super explicitly with no context. And, we're not homogeneous, so the only way that we can even give one another directions is extremely explicit, all of that. That's how America developed, whereas like Asian cultures are really high context. You read the air, they're homogeneous, so it's a totally different way of communicating.
Okay.
An example of high context, low context, I don't think I could put it together from what your statement was.
If in America, if we're giving directions, our directions are so explicit. We would say, you travel 3 miles, you turn right on Westerville Road, you go here, our directions are super, super explicit. If you go in, like even in Italy, if you go and you ask directions, oh, you just go down, you can't miss it, it's just, you know, it's down, it's just a short walk, you know, because you're expected to understand, you know, because there's a general, you know, grasp of the context. And if you come in as a foreigner, you're lost. Everybody in America was foreigners. So everybody was lost without explicit directions. That's why, you know, on communication theory, we're the lowest context culture on earth. We need super specific. When we're talking to one another, we'll then repeat it in an email. And just as we said at the meeting, blah, 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 blah. That's considered offensive in lots of places. It's like, do you think I'm stupid?
All right, so on to the next section of respecting behaviors, or respectful behaviors, talking about building bridges. And so how we build bridges in this world of, you know, cultural competency is focus on similarities instead of differences. Work itself out, forms to common ground. Be willing to get to know people as individuals. So again, that's that thing that takes time, right? We got to put in some intentional time. Foster an inclusive workplace atmosphere. You know, are we helping that happen? The golden rule, as you know, treat others as you would like to be treated, but the platinum rule is treat others as they would like to be treated. What do y'all think? Agree? Disagree?
I'm trying to teach my 10-year-old that.
I have some question on that latter part that you see, you know, treat others as they would like to be treated. I was always taught to treat others the way that you would like to be treated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think part of this, though, it's missing that communication piece, because people aren't mind readers, and you need to let people know how you would like to be treated. And I think, you know, that's one of the things that goes missing in this context is, you know, treat them how they want to be treated, blah, 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 blah. But if you don't verbalize, like, your boundaries and what you want and your wishes and who you are, that's hard for people to do. So until you know that information, until that's been communicated with you, I think the golden rule is still best until you learn otherwise, you know?
Or maybe in a different way would be simply to ask.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Ask what they want to be called.
Yeah, I like the platinum rule. I think it's a sense of humility. If you don't know how somebody else would like to be treated, it encourages you to explore that and understand that, rather than the default, which is, you know, I'm just going to treat you how I would like to be treated.
Because if we do that, then we're relying on our own experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be biased in a negative way. That's good, though. All right, traits that build cultural competency is being warm, being empathetic, being sensitive, being genuine, non-judgmental, be adaptable, being open to it, and being resilient. Again, as we think about the work that you all are tasked to do here, is, you know, all these things present, you know, and if they are, then y'all gonna do some amazing work together, so. What negative behaviors undermine cultural competence? So just asking y'all, what are some negative things that could hinder cultural competence taking place? Started you off with 2. People who are afraid to speak up and address issues, or people who laugh at jokes at others' expense. What are some other things that could negatively impact or undermine?
Assuming that you know when you don't know.
Yeah, assumptions.
Lack of care. Some people just don't really care. By others.
Yeah.
culture, and thinking those are normative and valued across all cultures.
Yeah. That's good.
I think it's because people don't speak up about maybe their experiences, not doing your due diligence, specifically in a work setting, to find out if people are satisfied, if they feel safe, if they belong in the work or in the department or job or whatever. I think pretending or believing that just everything is fine, I think undermines a lot of cultural competence because people aren't really willing to share a lot with leadership. And so as leadership, I think it is, their responsibility to go forward and find out on their own about the energy, behavior, and climate of workspaces in particular.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, because a lot of cultures or a lot of organizations, if they don't hear anything, they think that everything is fine until they take an assessment or assessment is given out, an employee engagement assessment is given out, then they'll find out like, ooh, there's a lot of people, it's not good. So then they can take some action from there. And so I want to ask a question. What is it? What would you define, or how would you define a sensitive situation for the work that you have to do here as it relates to this topic? Potentially.
Board and we start listening to cases, I mean, this is a very diverse and very opinionated group of folks. We will have disagreements and we won't see eye to eye on things.
Yeah.
So, understanding that is, okay.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with having a difference of opinion. But, be mindful of that going into it. It sort of, for someone like myself, it does sort of, it helps me manage how much I might get invested in what it is that we're about to discuss, right? And it does sort of help me regulate just what I wanna basically point out and what my points need to be, as a result of it. So.
That's good. All right.
Our whole nature of existence is a sensitive situation. The very thing that got us here to exist is a sensitive situation.
That's good. Yeah.
I think that absolutely, but I think that we're going to be able to work together and overcome the sensitive situations because I think we're building a respect for each other. And we're going to disagree, absolutely, because that's what we should do and discuss. Because that's how we're going to figure things out, through discussion and each one of us giving our expertise or whatever, our knowledge. But the respect that we have for each other and what each one says is what will get the job done, I think.
Agree? Even the public's view of our work will be a sensitive situation.
So you just keep going. Strategies for sensitive situations. And so when you're in these moments of, the sensitivity is, if you need to take a breather, take a breather, count to 100 if 10 is not enough. Consult a trusted confidant, practice positive intent. Just keeping all these things on top of mind as you go through the different cases that you may hear. And realize, because you are a diverse group of people, you're not going to think the same. You're not going to process things the same. But, be willingly to lean in and, be curious is what's going to help. So there's a case study activity I wanted y'all to do real quick. It included some of y'all board members here. Dr. Jones gave an overview presentation on an investigation that is currently active. After the meeting, Nathan came over and complimented her presentation on how well she handled the Q&A session after the presentation. Dr. Jones, you sounded very knowledgeable and competent, and you didn't even get emotional. Woo! Great job. And then Dr. Jones, who is very educated and has accomplished many things in her career, wasn't quite sure what to make of the comments. She suspected these compliments were ones Nathan had never given to her counterparts, all whom are men. So, what do you think Dr. Jones's goal in this situation should be?
Why Pastor Rich said that.
See, I didn't even say all that.
I would inquire
This is Nathan.
first. What did he mean by that?
Unless Pastor Rich was drunk that day, he would never say that. Because this is not something that would ever come out of my mouth.
So let's just say, what would be the goal if Dr. Jones had one in this?
I think an opportunity is there to actively call in a person and say, like, my favorite thing to say is, in a similar scenario, is like, what did you mean by that? Or explain that to me. Rather than me putting on you what I feel like you meant. I think it gives the person an opportunity to pause and maybe do some investigating before they come back with a response.
Would you do that in your office across your desk or over a cup of coffee?
So it depends, because I can give you an example of a moment where I had recently joined a leadership team within my office, and I was answering a question about how well we all work together, and I said, I would like to come into this space and feel like I do in my own team meetings. And I heard a colleague a few seats away say, in charge, like he was whispering that. And I heard it, and I said, no, not in charge. What I mean is, and so I took the opportunity in that moment because I feel like I heard it, a few other people sitting around heard it, and so in that moment, it was good to address then. But I think some things might be, depending on the level of egregiousness, might be such that we have to take somebody to the side or go have a chat over some coffee or tea.
Or Nathan could explain that the men were such a screw up that this was so refreshing that, you actually knew what you were talking about, and you didn't go crazy when you were getting grilled with questions. Good job.
Not. That would be the only way that would be okay.
I mean, we don't know what the presentation on the investigation was about. It could have been something very emotional to men and women, and Nathan could have said, you did a really wonderful job. You were knowledgeable, you were competent, and you didn't even get emotional as I would have, or as my fellow males. I mean, he probably included, I don't know what,
You make it up. It's an in quote.
What?
But here's the thing, but this is why we have to be curious in sensitive situations. Because, and assume positive intent until we find out otherwise, right? We have to give it a chance.
Yeah, I think a good, on this is what do you mean by that?
Yep.
Sorry, what do you mean by that? It's usually something that even if somebody does have bad intent, they can at least further explain themselves, and when they try, then it could go a lot worse or not, but that's a good step that happens for bystanders.
Sitting across Brooke's desk getting grilled like a salmon with her eyes when I'm trying to give her a compliment and, clear up that misunderstanding of Brooke. My God, that was so wonderful. I've never seen anything like it.
it's helpful for people to interpret themselves. So, when we make meaning, when something is a problem, that's usually a bad thing to do.
Can I say, in the context of what we're talking about today, we usually give this kind of like, I think Gambit said, the assumed positive intent. We give this pass to people in dominant cultures a lot. And I think personally, that keeps this kind of thing going, right? It always allows people room to make these mistakes with grace that we don't give to members of non-dominant cultures. So I agree with Brooke's approach. I'm all about calling people out in the moment. You wanted to say it in public, we're going to talk about it in public. That is my approach specifically to issues like this. But I think it's something to keep in mind, like who are we giving these passes to and why? Why is it that we're always so willing to give the benefit of the doubt in these moments? And I think that's something that, we as a group of people, not just in here, but we've really got to interrogate, like, why are we always willing to give such a pass?
I would also add that we probably need to take into consideration the relationship between, well, in this scenario, me and Pastor Rich. Like, if we know each other and I know, been communicating with him, so I get like the space from which he's coming from, that's one thing. But if I don't know him, we've never met or something like that, then you might have room to interpret that another way, and that might spark the inquiry, like, well, what did you mean exactly by that? So I think also taking that into consideration is what is the relationship between the two people?
Yeah, that's definitely big on it, because your group is fairly new and you're still beginning to learn more about each other, then there is space for grace. But it's still having the conversation, it's still being curious in it, because you do want to know. And before any defenses come up, at least have that conversation.
I do want to say this. I think that the situation needs to be addressed, but it's how we choose to address it and where we choose to address it that's key to me. Because it seems when you read this whole dialogue, there are triggers in there. Especially, when he says, not so much the knowledgeable and competent part, but he says, you didn't even get emotional. Well, that's a trigger for me. I want to know exactly what you were talking about. And what does great job mean? How do you define great job? How do you put the parameters of what a great job is? But I think those are things that I would really want to have a conversation with this individual about, so that I can have some clarity. But it's the when, the where, and the how I would choose to do that, because I'm not trying to tear down anybody else. I just need to know, because it may help me in the next setting that I go into to have clarity on that. So
I'm sitting here wondering if I should even say anything, because I feel that I have lived that statement so many times in my life. I was 34 when I went on the bench, the only African-American woman, and I think on the municipal court at that time, only 2 women. And so the triggers are there. It's being said because you're black and they're surprised that you are competent and whatever. The emotional is typically definitely an attribute that's about, women. And I would like to say that I was just thinking the other day, it was 35 years ago that I went on the bench, and that came to mind because of the most recent, our most recent nominee to the Supreme Court, and like it's so past time, and yet we're still doing the first. But anyway, that's another. I still am in the space, and I'm going to be specific, of Caucasians who will use those kinds of adjectives about people of color, as if they weren't expected to be knowledgeable and et cetera. And I agree with Mr. Thomas that many times we let them have a pass. It's just kind of, okay. So I probably have some work on me personally when it comes to this, but I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. It's good
And I
work.
do want to, I mean, do you have some closing comments? It's been so great having you with us today, but are there some ways you want to close us out?
Yeah, I mean, it's just continue to dive into this information that we've went over today and just take it home. And this gives us a snapshot view of each other here in this space. And so I would encourage you to just go through the activities and share with each other on how you all can continue to grow in this area of competency, culture competency.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. Thank you. So I don't call them housekeeping matters. Going back to, it would be item number 5. And you might say, how did that come about? Virtual meeting for CPRB discussion. So Mr. Tobias shared with me that the governor signed House Bill 51 that pretty much would permit us to be able to have virtual meetings if we chose to, up until June 30th of 2022. Remember, there had been a state law that pretty much mandated this before, and then it sunset, and we went back to in-person meetings. In the spirit of transparency, I felt that I needed to share this with the full board and to get your feedback on this. You know, we've been meeting in person, always. And, well, I'll just stop. I mean, so this option has been presented, you know, to us. Is there any member who has a thought about this option, of utilizing this option?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I think it's important, given the, you never know with the COVID variants and things like that, as to being flexible. I think our meeting times kind of coincided with, thankfully, not being in the midst of the wave, but I know, like the one we had in February, or not February, but then January was kind of in the wave of Omicron. And so I think having the flexibility is there. I do think there's obviously a lot of benefit in meeting in person, but given whatever the health situations look like, mask mandates going down, that might be useful in the future if you need it.
I think that it would be, it's a good tool to have in your possession. Because even going beyond the COVID situation, we never know in Columbus when we're going to have inclement weather. And it may not be advantageous for us to meet on that particular schedule, at that particular schedule. You know, sometimes we get ice, we get anything, and it may not even be safe for us to be on the streets, but it still gives the chair a tool that we can use.
But on their point, there's very specific notice requirements, and I only say that because sometimes with the weather, we just don't know. The forecast seemed to me to be pretty unreliable, but what I'm hearing is it's a tool, and so between now and June 30th, when it's no longer in effect, if there might be an occasion when we would need it.
What's the notice requirement?
The notice requirements in terms of when the meetings are going to be held and where. So, Colin, you would know what they are in terms of the posting, et cetera.
I'm not sure, Robert, you may be able to better speak to that.
We can let you know, but there's specific requirements as to when it's got to be posted, put in the and where, you know, it's going to be. It's not a long period of time, but it is a matter of a few days at least.
Because one of the other, hypothetical situations that I can imagine is, let's say there is a situation where there is a police shooting that engenders a protest. That somehow, I'm just thinking of a situation of civil unrest where it would be difficult to come downtown to, this meeting place, but it would be very helpful for us to meet. So I can imagine situations where having a very short notice period where we would want to gather might be really helpful.
Well, certainly all of those things will be considered. We don't need to make a decision today. It's just keep an open mind, and if things developed, then it is a tool that we have in our toolkit. I don't have anything to announce, I mean, just in terms of watching and listening to the news, but I would anticipate that by our next meeting, there will not be a mask requirement in the city of Columbus. As a matter of fact, I think probably next Monday, from what I'm hearing, city council might take action on this, but certainly before our April meeting. I just want to say to members of the board and to staff, if you feel the most comfortable continuing to wear your mask, please feel free to do so. You would be encouraged to do so. The April board meeting, I said earlier that we're not going to have a speaker or someone on training to come in. This is really, amongst us. I went back and I looked at our committees. So we have training and education, rules and regulations, standards of professionalism, community engagement, and then nominating. Has each committee met at least once? Yes? I know, I'm going to get to yours separately. Okay. That would be nominating.
Yes.
Will you be prepared to come in April to share where you are, to get any feedback? So, for example, I would think, especially with training and education and community engagement, that every board member might have a thought or want to weigh in, et cetera. So truly open, communication, on that. I don't know in terms of standards of professionalism and rules and regulations what you might be presenting, at that time, or if you have, and even if you want to ask questions, of the other board members, it would be the opportunity for that. And then beyond the committees, to have a discussion of where we think we are now and where we want to go. So we're kind of coming up on our first anniversary in terms of when we met. So we've spent most of this year, again, around the training that was required, then, of course, the hiring of the inspector, general, but just moving forward for the next, 12 months, what you want to consider. Are there topics that you want us to delve into in a much deeper way? So that's how I am thinking about, the meeting. The agenda would be the report from the committees. If any of you would want, you could reach out to me around a particular topic if you thought maybe, not just the topic, but if you needed some assistance in building it out, and I'm not even really sure what that means. I want you to feel very comfortable reaching out to me beforehand and to make sure that things get on the agenda that you want to discuss. But that's how I see the meeting going, except there is one other piece of business that I think needs to be done in April. And again, I'm going to check on this. So the nominating committee is chaired by Reverend Charles Tatum. Mr. Thomas is on it. It did not have a third member, but Mary Younger has agreed to serve on that committee. So it is a committee of 3. My initial term as chair would be up. Ms. Burns was elected at a different time, and so I don't know if she would be up for, if that position would be up, or is it at some point later, and that might just be a decision around what makes the most sense, should the 2 positions, be elected at the same time. So that is what we're looking at. And again, I am going to be very transparent with the board. It is my desire to continue in the role of chair for an additional year, and so I am sharing that with the committee. Any other member who has an interest, then you should reach out to the chair of the committee, Reverend Tatum. And it probably makes sense to go ahead and to have that take place in April. Reverend Tatum, do you think we have enough time for your committee to meet?
I believe we have plenty enough time for that. I just need to know that, just need everybody on this board to know if you have interest in being chair or considered to be co-chair, we just need to have those names.
And I think we should set a time period on those individuals reaching out to you. By Friday, March the 11th at 5 p.m., because this is just a brief contact with, Reverend Tatum. And then that gives him plenty of time to convene the committee, to have the discussion, to bring back a recommendation to the board. And as always, there can be a nomination from the floor, as I recall the election rules. And so our meeting in April is April 5, the 5th. As your chair, I'm also, we've been working hard. The statute only requires us to meet quarterly, where we have been meeting monthly. So I'm anticipating that coming out of the April meeting, there might need to be some work on some either committees or other areas. And so I am thinking, but don't take it off of your calendar yet, that we will not have a May board meeting, depending on what happens in April, and again, giving you enough time, giving us enough time to work on whatever comes up, in April.
We currently have de-escalation slated for May.
We can move de-escalation.
Okay.
Because that's the only thing, and it isn't going to take that long, and I think a break would be in order. So we can just move that. And we'll work with them as to when that would work. Any questions about any of that?
I do have
Yes.
one question. When will we know for how we're going to deal with the co-chair situation?
No, it's not
Or assistant chair, or whatever?
it's vice chair,
Vice
or
chair.
vice chair. I don't think that there's anything that really guides us in that, other than what I would call maybe just some common sense. So why don't we just go ahead and say we'll handle both at the same time? It makes sense? Okay.
Just wanted some clarity.
Thank you. And Ms. Burns can share whether or not she wants
Yes.
to be considered.
Sure, yes.
Yes.
Yes, I was going to reach out, when she said reach out to Mr. Tatum.
Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah, I would be
So it'll be
interested.
both positions
Very good.
in April.
Very good.
Would it be possible, if we don't have the May meeting, maybe a meeting after that, to just hear from the new Inspector General and, because she's going to be hiring people, and kind of what are some of her thoughts as she's building up the office?
That is an excellent point.
And maybe that
Well,
might be April,
Could we be a part of it in April? Do we?
Not to put you on the spot.
She said yes, yes. Okay. Let's say about 30 minutes in terms of kind of where you are. I can share with you that in terms of just chatting with her and looking at this sort of the onboarding, calendar, I was one who was thinking that going out to meet the area commissions. So currently, if you look at July, that's where they're what I call the various festivals and that type of thing. And I was thinking we'd want to go, forward. But I certainly understand, and the decision was made, that Ms. Hendricks wants to have everything in place before she goes to the commission meetings. So that's the complaint process, all the materials, the website, just everything. So I think she'll be looking, again, at areas of the city and maybe prioritizing which ones will be first. And I think we also, in this meeting, we've talked about before, and we talked with Ms. Hendricks, that, again, not the entire board, but 1 or 2 board members per meeting. And that's something, if you have an interest, when you meet with Ms. Hendricks, please talk to her about that. Again, that's going to happen. I'm hoping that she will have been able to meet with each and one of you before the April meeting. Even with being gone for a week, they've started that process. And something else to share. Colleen is going to provide administrative support to Ms. Hendricks. She will actually be in her office 2 days a week? We haven't decided yet. But she's going to have administrative support from Colleen until she hires her own executive assistant. And I know that she's working with HR right now around the job postings and all of that. They are certainly, moving along with that.
I think the point about the April meeting makes sense. I still think there's some questions that we have yet to answer as a board in terms of how we would operate in terms of complaints and how we operate as a public-facing body. Moments of when public will want to come in to talk about certain things, if that's ever a situation. So I do think it would be useful that April meeting and maybe future meetings to think about kind of our cadence and how we operate for open discussion beyond the trainings.
And on that particular, and you've raised that before, and I agree. I don't know if that's April or maybe even June. Because I think, again, the building out the Office of the Inspector General, I know that Ms. Hendricks has, and she maybe hasn't talked yet, but there's also a thought that there will be this, not only the training of her team, but training with, the police chief has mentioned that there'll need to be this training with certain folks, from her office. And those questions are not going to be answered by April. But your point is right on target. So we're not anticipating the way the statute was changed, and I'm looking at Mr. Tobias. Is the date July? July 11th. So the way, now, and she could, Ms. Hendricks could do it earlier, but right now, she has up until July the 11th to get all of this operational before we would anticipate being able to take in complaints.
If I could also add too, because I was going to say our subcommittee, so Gambit and I are on the rules and regulations, and when we look at the city charter, there is overlap of how we're supposed to draft those things in conjunction with the chief inspector. So I think that part of our presentation, we're going to show what we have done so far, but a lot of that's contingent on what personnel is in the office, like what internet system we have for taking complaints and setting those things up. So I think those will be worthwhile discussions to get some input on, at least what we're hoping, because we have ballpark numbers of timeframes that we think things should move in. But I think it involves a lot of input from the rest of the board and the chief inspector so that we know what that looks like.
That's great to hear. And there is, and Ms. Hendricks is balancing this out in terms of the anticipated number of meetings that she will have in the onboarding. I'm just going to throw, so there are 10, so I am meeting with her on a weekly basis. Then there are 10 of you. Are we talking maybe 40 to 50 individuals or groups between now and July? It's a ballpark. There are a lot of people. And so there's the balance, and we think it's very important for her to get to know the community and the folks, who, that are in it. There's this balance of the work of literally building the office of the Inspector General and all that that means, and then her meeting with, and the individuals are across the spectrum in terms of, and we certainly were assisted with this from individuals from Deputy Chief Kate Pichotti's office, because they've done the same thing with the police chief and the public safety director. So we weren't starting with a blank, sheet of paper. Yes.
Following that, I almost hate to say this, but, so. As to the Community Engagement Committee, you indicated that Ms. Hendricks is going to be going to commission meetings. And in our committee, we talked about who we would want to go out to and meet with. And I think there's kind of an overlap as to what the IG is going to be doing and what this particular committee it wants to do. So it's very important.
So I would suggest that I think you have enough time, and as we prioritize meetings,
Yeah.
I think you and the Inspector General should definitely meet before the April meeting.
Yes.
And even if you're going to have, and I don't know if you're going to have another committee meeting, if you would want her there, to listen and to discuss if that would be, okay, because.
I think we've had enough committee meetings.
Then I think you can just meet with her.
I think I just need to meet with
Yeah.
her. I've got the questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, as you're meeting with the Inspector General, and I'm not setting your agenda, part of it is just to get to know each other, but you might be asking questions around expectations. What are her expectations of you, and vice versa. But if you are chairing a particular committee, you may also want some input, there. I would just call it free-flowing, informative. Yes, Reverend?
Chair Jackson, it seems to me that there's no sense in reinventing the wheel. And if the IG is planning on doing these various events as far as outreach to commissions and communities, there's no reason why our committee cannot work in conjunction with her. And if it's just one of us going out with maybe if it's one or two other board members that want to go out on in certain areas, at least as long as one of us on that committee is there and present with the IG, I think that we will be effective in completing our goals.
And I think, again, that the number of commissions, I think is 21. I think, and again, I've asked for, a map. Ms. Hendricks, wants to see it so she can begin to get a real, feel for, this, the city of Columbus. But I absolutely agree with Reverend, Tatum. We want to do this in tandem, if at all possible. Okay? Yes.
Because say, for instance, I want to go out with her, make sure that I'm with her in the Linden area, because I chair a number of committees in the Linden area, and I know all of the commissioners there. Plus, there are other groups, African-American groups, clergy, other individuals that I would like to be able to make sure that we can kill a whole bunch of birds with a number of stones, so we ain't got to keep traveling, can be there in that process. So I think that that's one of the best ways to do that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Then may I get a motion to adjourn? So moved by Pastor Nathan, second, I saw it over here somewhere. Mr. Strickland. All in favor indicate, raise your hand. We are adjourned. Thank you.